In today's lesson, we're going to be starting our unit on the Cold War, which aligns to the South Carolina Social Studies Curriculum Standard 5-4. This time period in history goes from much of the 20th century that we're going to be learning about key events and things that happened and why they happened. So in your interactive social studies notebook, you're going to set up the next page, which is for 5-5.2. If you notice, the verb here is to summarize, so you must be able to understand the content in a way that will allow you to be able to pull together the things that we're going to be talking about. So you're going to be summarizing the social, cultural, and economic developments that took place in the United States during the Cold War, including consumerism, mass media, the growth of suburbs, expanding educational opportunities, new technologies, the expanding job market and service industries, and the changing opportunities for women in the workforce. So all these are things that we'll be working on during this lesson. If you would, go ahead and set this up in your notebook. I'm going to continue on in the lesson. So the first thing that we want to talk about today is the effects of post-World War II prosperity. So the impact of cultural developments in the United States following World War II was the result of returning prosperity and returning soldiers. When the war ended, many women returned home from work they had been doing for the war effort and became homemakers and consumers. American factories were able to switch production back to consumer goods. Wartime workers had money to spend, and products that had not been available during the war, such as automobiles, were in high demand. The resulting post-war prosperity allowed many people to spend money on new American products. So if I think about this, basically people are able to pick up in their lives, except the economy during World War II allowed for there to be money that they had access to. So things that you need to keep in mind in this is that when the war ended, many women returned home from work they had been doing during the war effort and became homemakers and consumers. During this time, many families were started in what became known as the baby boom era. As soldiers came back from the war, they got married and they started families. This in turn meant there were a lot of children that actually born in the post-World War II years. That baby boomer generation, as they are called today, are now the ones retiring, those that are at retirement age in our country. American factories also being able to switch back from making war goods to making consumer goods. So for example, the factories that had been converted to making airplanes for the war went back to making automobiles because products like automobiles became very high demand. They had not been available for new purchase during the war. So those workers that worked on those planes and tanks and guns had money to spend, and they could spend it on things like automobiles during this time period. Now, soldiers returning by starting families, a point that I mentioned just a moment ago, as it related to the last slide. But there was a trend in home building. The development of suburbs was made possible by even greater availability of the automobile and is most often associated with the 1950s. The trend of moving to outlying city neighborhoods began in the late 19th century due to the availability of trolleys and continued in the 1920s with the automobile. So if you think about, we are sitting outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, where we're at. We are considered by many to be a suburb of Charlotte. So many people work in Charlotte and then live here in Lake Wylie in the Clover area. So they have that ability to do that though with their car. They don't have to live right where they work. And this became a very big trend during the 1950s and people deciding where they wanted to settle and start their families. So large tracts of land located on the outskirts of town were bought by developers. The land was then divided into hundreds of plots on which new houses were built. Americans began to leave the cities in which they worked to buy new homes in these new suburban developments and commute to work. A new highway system to link major metropolitan cities increased suburbanization. So I want you to think about this. We're sitting in a place where you can look around and there are different subdivisions still today that are new. Many of you live in a subdivision located near the school. That is very much the case that Americans started doing this during this time period, started moving out of the cities and to live in these suburban developments and commute to work. In addition, we've talked about the highway system that was developed thanks to President Eisenhower. That new highway system is what enabled people to even be able to travel even more between metropolitan areas and suburbs. So we've talked a little bit about where people chose to live and how they spent money. Some of the things that got people's attention during the time was kind of the pop culture and television of the time period. Mass media, the widespread availability of radios, movies, and the new medium of television helped to spread popular culture or pop culture to urban, suburban, and rural communities throughout the United States. Radio spread new rock and roll music. Television became the center of American family entertainment. Advertisers used the new medium to spread their message, and soon everyone wanted the same goods, including slinkies, cap guns, coonskin hats, Barbie dolls, and hula hoops. All things that come out during this time period. The use of the radio and television is what helped spread the word about these products, so then people wanted to buy them. Television becomes very important to American society during this time as a way to get information. So some things to keep in mind is that the mass media and what that was defined as during that time period, and it helped spread popular culture to all these different areas throughout the United States. And then this advertisers piece, because this is when marketing changes from just being in print in magazines or posters to being in a form that people can see watching on their TVs in their living rooms. So now all this purchasing and leads to what we consider something called consumerism. So due to an increase in jobs and production necessary to sustain the war effort, the economy of the United States experienced a boost, lifting the nation out of the Great Depression. So an increase in jobs and production is what helped bring us out of the Depression. The United States experienced an economic boom following the conclusion of World War II. Americans devoted much of their financial priorities to the war effort. Industries that had focused their efforts on war materials shifted to production of consumer goods. As a result of an increase in wartime jobs, Americans had savings with which to purchase new products such as automobiles, televisions, and radios, which had not been available during the war. Remember, during wartime production, all of these things were not in production. So people, even though they were making money working factory jobs, they didn't necessarily have the means to be able to buy them because they weren't out there. So the United States boom during this time period is what really changes things in America. And that whole shift that people had money that they could now spend on all of these new products that were available to them. And that's what we consider consumerism, the ability to buy. Advertising encouraged people to buy, and an increasing consumerism dominated American culture. As consumers had more money to spend, service industries such as dry cleaners and restaurants expanded. The automobile and the new highway system gave a rise to motels and fast food restaurants. More consumer credit was available in the form of credit cards. So all of this section would be things that I would write down. A lot of the things that we are used to today in life expand and grow during this time period. During this time period is, for example, the birth of McDonald's. This is when you see fast food restaurants come in play and motels. because people are traveling more and fast food is convenient. They need motels to stay for travel. So life starts to change more in a way that looks similar to what you're used to today. Some various advertisements on this page to kind of give you an idea of different things you have. Soups and television. If you notice, Motorola today produces cell phones, but back years ago they actually developed televisions. You notice a lot of the advertisements, maybe the way they're designed, maybe to catch people's attention. For instance, the one about this electric stove down at the bottom, and who maybe the target audience would be for that. I want you to think about who they're targeting with each of these advertisements. So new technologies created new products, improved existing ones, and entice consumers to buy new and improved products. Changes to the automobile, such as automatic transmissions, radial tires, and power steering, made them safer and easier to drive. Jet engines and pressurized cabins changed the airline industry by providing faster, more efficient air travel. Improved telephone service, including long distance and new televisions, changed communication, strengthened national and international connections. And then lastly, just a variety of some other things. One that was really important was air conditioning, because it became more widely available, making the South a more attractive place to live and establish industries. Air conditioning also moved the family off the front porch and inside the house to the front of the television. Think about how each of these things would have changed life. I would make sure that I write something down regarding each of these improvements upon lives that people had the ability to experience during this time, and then take a look at some of the different pictures and advertisements that go with each. So what I want you to do for this one is I want you to pretend a little bit that you're living during this time period in history. Write a letter to someone living today about what your life is like in the late 1940s and 1950s. Be sure to include examples from your notes. So I want you to kind of think about like a letter from the past to the future, explaining what your life would be like with all the changes that had taken place. Finish. Finish.